time to get your fix. Come on down, get your horrible gaming review. 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 Wow.
Hello, my name is Zachariah with Old Man Gaming. Welcome to another horrible game review, and man am I excited for this one today. Before we get into it, gotta do our usual disclaimers. The word horrible in the title of this video does not necessarily refer to the DLC or the game that I am reviewing, but much more the review itself. I do snap judgment reviews here. I only really get 5 to 10 hours with a game tops, and I'm just trying to give you an idea whether you're going to be able to play it right off the bat and have fun or not. In addition to that, I do not give scored reviews here. I don't believe in scored reviews for video games. I think it's one of the most subjective forms of art. So therefore, I'm going to give you an overview of what the game is, its story, how it works. Then I'm going to tell you the pros and the cons of the game in my point of view, as all reviews are. And then I will tell you whether I personally will be sticking with this game outside the purposes of this review. Alright, business out of the way. I am reviewing Monster Hunter Stories 2, Wings of Ruin today, and I'm going to do a little spoilers. This right now, as it stands, is my game of the year for 2021. I am just so utterly thrilled with this game, and so utterly thrilled when I get to be positive. I know I did not like Rise, and the internet didn't like me for not liking Rise, but at the same time, I am so happy that this has come around and really gotten me excited and into the game. So what Monster Hunter Stories is instead of your average Monster Hunter game, which is the action sort of adventure, hunting one giant beast kind of boss fight sort of situation, it's a turn-based game where you take up the mantle of a rider, someone who goes out and finds monster eggs, hatches them, and then trains them into his own kind of stable. Not too far off from Pokemon. I know a lot of people are making that comparison out there. I don't really feel it's right. Nonetheless, it's still in that kind of vein. So the battles themselves take place with you and your chosen monster. You do get 4 monsters in the back lot. I think there is an unlockable 6th slot for another monster on your team that you can switch out once per turn. In addition to that, your rider gets 3 weapons, not just one, and he or she can switch out between that once per turn as well. And that is key to the battles. The battles themselves are kind of built on a rock, paper, scissors foundation. Your normal attacks being technical, power, and speed. Power beats technical, technical beats speed, speed beats power. But then when they take I love when they take that small simplicity of something and then they just build a castle on it. I did a first impression video when I got to play the demo a couple of weeks ago on this, so a lot of this is going to be retreaded territory, and I'm sorry about that. I did my best, given that the release date was this Friday and we are not a big enough channel to receive early access to anything. I did my best to get as much playing in on the actual full version as I possibly could before I did this review. The weapon typing matters dependent on the monsters, and what's interesting about this is information still is key. That's one of the things I loved about Monster Hunter World, is you could follow a monster around, you could learn its habits, you could learn where it hunts, and from that you could gather weaknesses. And then once you knew its weaknesses, you knew how it fight, you could train how it fight, you could train how to fight it. With this one, it's not really exploratory, which again was one of my biggest complaints about Rise, was I didn't feel the connection to the environment that World had. With this though, that connection isn't there, but they make up for it in so many beautiful ways. Namely, information, like I said, is still key. When you first fight a monster, you don't know how much health it is. You don't know what weapons will work on it. You don't know what elements will work on it. I love that about that it's trial and error. Oh, I hit it with a sword, now there's a line through the sword, and I need to switch to something else. As you fight it more, you get to learn those things, and then the bars actually appear as you go, which is one of my favorite parts about that. I guess that should have been in a pro section, but I'm still trying to define the combat for you guys. In addition to that, nothing attacks, everything else attacks on its own AI-based whatever. So the monster you have with you has its own attack patterns. And the key to this game is predicting what your monster or your battle buddies are going to do. Battle buddies being sometimes you travel with another rider and his or her monster. Actually, you spend a lot of the time, from what I've seen, in that kind of shape. So predicting what they can do, and you can see what they're going to do before they do it in a turn, but trying to predict what they do, trying to work with them. There's all sorts of sync-up moves, and then, of course, when you fill up this one bar, you can actually ride your monster and get huge big attacks. But even that creates this interesting amount of choice, because you get to choose whether, because once you're together, you're actually more powerful on the normal attacks. So you have to choose whether to do some normal attacks or just hit with that big kinship move right off the bat, because every moment you're on the monster, you risk getting knocked off of it and then losing that kinship. There's also another balancing act, because your kinship actually works as your gauge for your special maneuvers. Each maneuver has its own special maneuvers and different techniques that you can throw out there with your guy, and every weapon is incredibly unique in that way. But you have to constantly balance whether you're trying to build that kinship gauge to ride your monster and do the big attacks, or whether you're trying to use those smaller but still very effective techniques. One of the most interesting things I've been doing with it is I play with Hunting Horn. Hunting Horn is almost completely support, but it uses a lot of kinship gauge to do it. So I don't end up getting the kinship a lot, but I end up supporting my teammates quite well, so I have to have a monster that can really deal out some damage on its own. It's just very interesting. There's so many different variations and so many different additions to this. What's even cooler is the right of channeling. And fair play to everybody that you should know, little extra disclaimer, I never played Monster Hunter Stories, the first one. And I haven't really played Monster Hunter games other than Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter Rise, and this one. I love Monster Hunter World, though. It is easily probably my favorite game of all time. I've just put so many hours into it and can still go back to it. I just loved it. Rise didn't do it for me, but this one is. But that in mind, some of this stuff you guys might have experienced if you're long-term Monster Hunter fans that I may be going on about that I just haven't experienced yet. However, there is the right of channeling, which you take your extra monsters, the monsters you're not going to use because you get duplicates of monsters over and over again, and you can take out their genes and put them into your special monsters. And this has a whole system to it as well. Your genes unlock as the monster levels up, making them more powerful, not just in health and attack, but in the special. And then if you put the genes in the right spot on their little gene thing, you get what's called bingo, which can double and triple their effectiveness. What's even cooler about this is you can make your monsters kind of all over the place. You can, instead of taking just a water monster and making it more powerful in the art of water, you can actually respec them a little bit. You can work with their build to make them split up elements to attack in different ways, and attack in different with different elements, which is really cool as well too. So do you want that Royal Ludroth that can just kick ass with water? Do it. Do you want the Azeros that's a multitask jackknife? You can do it here. And that's really cool, and I can't wait to see how that works in the multiplayer arena that they've set up. I think that that's going to be a really cool addition and a really cool thing to try. Plus, they've got co-op stuff down the line and a ton of roadmap stuff coming. As far as the story goes, I think I kind of went over it in the first impressions. I don't want to retread it too much, but basically you're a young kid who is growing up in this rider thing. You're just about to take your rider tests, and some stuff starts going down. Your village is protected by this ancient Rathian called the Guardian Ratha, which is tied to the original game that I never played, but I didn't ever feel like I missed out on the story. Your grandfather is Red, who, from what I understand, was the main character of the original game. Again, never felt like I was missing out on anything. And the Ratha disappears, and you have to figure out why. And it takes you on this globe-trotting JRPG sort of quest. I just thought that was so great and so awesome. But, I mean, I don't want to go too far into the story. I don't want to give spoilers to people. I don't want to cut everything away. And some things about the story are probably its weakest elements, which we'll talk about in pros and cons. But, I think I covered this basically. Let's move on to pros and cons and get into this. So as always, we go positive first here, and pro number one, the Monster Den gameplay loop. Okay, so how you get eggs in this game? You fight a monster. You either hit it with a paintball, which increases your chance of a monster retreating, or it retreats on its own, but it retreats. And then it creates this thing called a den, which is just this little cave that shows up on a random wall wherever you are. Then you walk up to the den, you go in, and they're procedurally generated. Once you're inside the den is procedurally generated, so you have to move through it in some way to find the nest, with monsters, treasure chests, materials, the whole 9 yards inside. Once you find the nest, you have to collect eggs and decide which one you can walk out with, because you can only walk out with one. Once you walk out with that one, it gets added to your egg carton, and whenever you're back in town, you can hatch whatever eggs you have. So there's a lot of fun just going out into a map and just going from den to den to den to den, collecting eggs to take them back. And I gotta say, I was getting a little bit worried about this until the Rite of Channeling opened up for me, and then I was like, wow, this is going to be great, because I was running out of space and I had so many duplicates I didn't know what to do with. So it was fun, but I was like, okay, it's got to get better, and it does. It just gets so much better. What's even cooler about this procedural generation, and this is really procedural generation done right, is that the procedural generation you can almost like inception a couple more levels out of it. So like if you go into a monster den and you end up hitting a monster and getting him to retreat, there'll be another monster den there. So you can go into that monster den, then come back into the monster den you're in to get the egg from that one to leave that monster den. It's crazy. The monster den, of course, vanishes after you've completed it and gotten the eggs out of it, but you also get rare monster dens, which are the gold ones. There are ever dens, which never go away, but once you do them, they're kind of done. And then it's just such a satisfying loop to get these eggs, to head back to town, to open them up. One of the cooler things that I liked about it too is that the monsters are not necessarily the monster that was nesting in is what you get. In the demo was one issue I had, and I don't know if I talked about it in the first impressions or not, but every egg you pull in the demo is the monster that you just fought. You fight a Bulldrome, then you get a Bulldrome egg. You fight a Kuluyaku, you get a Kuluyaku egg. And I was like, that's going to be a little bit boring, but in this you actually have chances to pull monsters of different types. I got a Royal Ludloth. My Royal Ludloth that I'm losing right now, I didn't get from a Royal Ludloth nest. I got it. This is too many mouthfuls. I got it from a Yan Kutku nest, which was really cool to me. So I think that gives you that kind of like surprise. I mean, there's more chance that you're going to get the same kind of monster, but it's different. My next pro is the combat system. You know, I gotta say, one of the things I saw in the IGN review is that they kind of knocked it for repetitive combat. And while the combat is slightly repetitive, it is only repetitive in the way that any JRPG would be repetitive after certain amounts of time. Other than that, this game does an amazing job of making every fight feel fresh. Depending on there's so many different levels to the combat, I don't have time to describe how many different mechanics are in the combat. And don't worry, you're not going to get overwhelmed. The tutorial's really well done and basically explain everything in a really well, not a huge drop sort of way, that I kind of picked it up real fast, and it was still really complicated. But it's so good that every fight feels different. Where the bad guys attack, where you attack, you're always learning something about your opponents that you're fighting. And yeah, they can get repetitive because JRPGs and turn-based games like that can get repetitive. However, IGN kind of singled that out, and I don't know why, because they didn't single that out from like Persona or any other JRPG, because that's really it. That's the normal amount of repetition in this. But what's even better is most of the fights are skippable. And I know what you're saying. I've played JRPGs before. You skip the fights, you get underleveled. Not in this game. I don't know how they're doing it, and I haven't gotten too high, but I've gotten far enough in and skipped enough fights to not be the right level, but somehow I've been the right level every time. Not only that, this will be my next pro, so I'm not going to say it here, but just they do such a good job of balancing the combat, making it feel like when you want to fight in it, it's always interesting, and it's also relatively easy to skip. I mean, sure, every once in a while you're going to jump into a monster den and just get attacked by a monster and you got to fight it, or you're going to not take precedence and get surprised, but that's kind of cool in its own way. I really, really, really liked how they did the combat in this, because turn-based games tend to make me shy away, which is why I'm so surprised about how much I love this game. And I think it's because they did everything right that I think every other turn-based game should really take a cue from them. My next pro is the power leveling in this game. Okay, so another thing you run into in JRPGs, even Pokemon, is the fact that you'll get a character or a thing at a really low level, and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? I've got to power level this thing. The power leveling in this game is amazing. Because you have a team of 5, probably 6 at some point, but 5 monsters, you only ever actually have to have 1 in. You can switch it out, definitely, but what are the odds you're going to use 5? So you have 3 really top tier guys, and then you have 3 other slots that you just put any low rank monster in, and they get such a boost from battles. I mean, like 3 levels sometimes from just a fight, just a normal fight. So you just put them in, and they just level in the background so quickly, too, that they become useful really fast. I never worry about getting that monster that I really want at a level 1, because I know it's going to take me 4 or 5 fights to get it to where I need to be. And that's just awesome. I've never seen that in other JRPGs. I mean, you'll collect characters sometimes, and they'll just be at the right level coming in, but whenever you're collecting things, they always start at like way lower level. This one just levels them right up, and I just love it. My final pro that I'm going to go into that I'm really excited about is the look of this game, the animation of this game. Sure, it's on Switch, so it's cel-shaded and not as pretty as your huge, big name AAA next-gen stuff, but it's just so great to look at. And the other thing about it is the way they animate the battles. And it's one of the things that keeps the battles fresh, is every move, every action has this like its own quick cutscene. It doesn't take too long. Some of them take a little long. The longest ones are like the kinship big super attacks, but you can skip them if you get annoyed with them. I have not yet get annoyed with them. I enjoy watching them nuke the entire planet, but like it's just so snappy and quick and fresh, and I just really like that. I also like how snappy the combat is. Every attack matters because so much damage is being dished out to both sides. So really every round is a chance for you to lose a guy, even in weaker fights. And there is also a handy-dandy instant finish if you're like 5 or 10 levels above your opponents. You can just hit these 2 buttons together and it just ends the fight and you get the best rewards. Really cool when you're backtracking and trying to find stuff and just trying to find chests to clear things. You just run into monsters, you just go, boom, they're dead, I'm out, I'm moving out, because we knew it was going to happen. It's awesome. They've just got this combat system so well balanced. It just keeps bringing me back for more. It really does. And when I get sick of it and I want to move on, it's easy to move past the enemies. So I'm really enjoying that. But this game is not perfect, so we got to move into the cons. My number 1 con is a little bit more a personal preference. So this might not be a con for you if you're a big anime fan or whatever, but the story isn't doing it for me. There's a lot of anime hijinks here. Your character is silent again, much like in Monster Hunter World, just with the head nods and whatever, but there's just so much conversation around him. It's not like the handler just explains something, then you go fight a thing like a badass. There's so many characters and so many plot points that just didn't make me feel connected. Especially the cat friend that you have that's just bouncing around and saying all sorts of stupid jokes. I don't know, they definitely went, obviously they're trying to bring in a little bit of a younger audience with this game on a lot of fronts, but it just didn't land with me. I don't feel the connection with these characters that I probably should. I feel much more connection with my faceless monsters that I've been capturing and renaming than I do with the actual characters that I'm talking to. That being said, I'm very early on in the story. It probably gets better, but if you really don't like a ton of anime hijinks, this one might be a little bit of a downer. I'm going to tell you that everything else well balances the scales, but still, just something I need to point out. My next big con, and most of these cons are a little bit nitpicky, so just bear with me. The next big con is a few design issues I have with the game. Just little things that don't make it feel as crisp and clean as a normal game. Some invisible walls that I really didn't like. Sometimes where like a monster runs into something and he shouldn't have run into something. Stuff like that. Some just overall clipping issues and whatnot. There is that in this game a little bit. You know, it is what it is. One thing I do like, I haven't encountered any bugs. It's still crisp in that way, like no bugs, no game crashes, nothing like that. But just a couple of like invisible walls and design things that I have a little bit of a problem with. That's all. And then finally, my last one is the same one from the first impressions video that I had, and that is there really should be a quick cycle through your lead monstie. There is if you walk over, like, because the monsties in the world exploration also have their own powers. Like some of them can swim, some of them can like do this big jump from place to place, some of them can climb vines. You really need... And if you walk over the thing, so let's say I walk over to a jump area, the cat will tell me, hey, we got a monstie for this, do you want to switch that monstie? Which is great. I can just switch that monstie and do it, but once I do it, I still have to then go into my menu and switch back to my lead monstie that I want to. I would much rather have just like a button for cycling through, and they have buttons for that. They have buttons free in the exploration. I don't know why they didn't just think, oh, let's just make a quick button to just cycle through what monster they are without having them go through 3 menus. So that was a little bit annoying, but again, very nitpicky on my front. But I gotta point it out. You know, I noticed it, I gotta point it out. Alright, this one went a little bit long, but I love talking about the ones that I love, so it had to go a little bit long. As far as stick with it, I think you guys know my answer by now. This game right now, as it stands before anything else comes out, is definitely my pick for Game of the Year when we decide to do the Horrible Game Awards. And I don't see the rest of the playthrough changing that. The loop is so satisfying, and if this has even half the content that World has, I'm going to be playing this for hours. Hours upon hours just finding new monsters, making new monsters, leveling up monsters, and doing the customized writer channeling. There's just so much to do here, especially with a multiplayer mode I'm very excited to try out. I unfortunately did not get to. And future updates, a lot of future updates. Their roadmap is stacked.
Monster has appeared. Very close.
So with that said, I hope that helped you guys, maybe helped your opinion as to whether or not you want to play it. And yeah, you guys can check us out on Facebook at OldManGamingTH, on Twitter at OldManGaming9. You can join our Discord. Link will be in the description below. You can influence this and all of our shows from there. And as usual, as long as you guys keep watching, we'll keep making them. We'll see you guys next time.
What do you say we get this show on the road?